All right, welcome everybody. This is Doug with thelincolnlist.com. This is the weekly report for the 12th of October. October has been a really good month so far. As I say with almost every one of these videos, if you guys are struggling, if you're getting tossed around in this market and just smoked every once in a while, or you're just really not getting what you need. And what I mean by that is if you just have a couple of good trades followed by bad. You can't put together consistency because I'm telling you right now, the name of the game isn't big profits. The name of this game is consistency. If you don't have that, you will never survive for the long terms. You'll have some great times, you'll have some good feasts, but you'll also go through some famine. So if you want to drink that wine, you want to drink it, and you want that fountain to be constantly running right down your mouth of good fortune, then you need to visit thelincolnlist.com. Be a consistent trader. Take the 14-day free trial. Let's pick up where we left off last week. If you watched last week's video about the SPY, I thought we would bounce a little bit, but I got to be honest with you, I did not see a bounce of this strength. This is like the Rocky Balboa market now, where you just bash this thing and it just keeps getting up and coming back. It keeps getting up and coming back. If we take a deeper look, I mean, this is another sharp V-shaped kind of recovery that we had. And this thing, you know, by the time the Fed minutes were released on Thursday, this thing almost came back to the height of after the Fed announcement. So this is a pretty good bounce here. If we're going into Monday, and we're going to be looking about maybe some new levels, I think we have to have some back testing down in here. If you're looking for a rally, let's kind of put it this way. If you're looking for a rally, if you're looking if this is going to continue, or if that's the question you're asking, we're going to have to back test, I think, down in the 198s or maybe down in the 196s in this level before you can gear up and go to 210. I mean, that would be the logical move. But is the stock market full of logic? Hell no. If it was, it wouldn't operate like this, that's for sure. So maybe it does go to 205. Maybe it does go back up to 2010. 2010. 210, let's just say. There's not a 2010. It sounded good. We'll kind of use that as a new word. 2010. So maybe it goes to 205 or 210. But we'll see what happens here. I think after such a bold move from 188 up to this 201 here, we could use a rest if you're really looking for sustained strength. But you never know in this market. This is a pretty important level, I would say, here, at least in the short term. 202.97, the highs from the Fed announcement on September. That's what we want to look at. See how that level acts if it gaps up or it kind of runs in there. Now, what this has done on the other side has really made some of these stocks have some berserk moves. I mean, one we got to look at here has to be CPA. I've been trailing this thing for a few days. I've taken a couple of shots at it. Obviously, no success to the short side here. But this stock is up huge over 3 days, 46 to 61. Not only that, when you look at the internals from this thing, this is just grinded to the oblivion. Since it started, there's a trend line. Look at this. You draw a trend line. You haven't even broken this thing. It's so solid. And what I was really waiting for, I've had it featured on our watch list for the last few days. What you really have to have, I think, in this scenario, since it hasn't, is you need that blow-off move. You need that big parabolic in this chart. I mean, yeah, it's parabolic on the daily, but the intraday has yet to really go para. I mean, look, it's got a couple of paras right here, you know, where there was some short opportunity, but it's very short-lived. And then today it was just grind. So I'd be looking for some sort of blow-off move or an explosive move to the upside. If it doesn't offer that, it's going to have to, there's a few things are going to have to happen before it becomes a short. This is where we talk about what's important. When you're trying to trade, here's where a lot of traders go wrong. They look at a stock and they say, it's up a lot, we got to short it. In theory, that's a great idea, but that's not necessarily how this game works. What you're doing is you're trading a setup. So you're waiting for not just an overbought stock, but you're waiting for an internal move on an overbought stock to deliver some sort of setup move, you know, and that's what you want to trade. So you're not looking just to short it because it's up. You're looking for these little blow-off moves like right here that will retrace. A good example of that for those that might not understand what I'm talking about is, let's take a look at ITCI here late Friday. You know, you've got a good trend and you're trending up nice, and then you explode. That's the short move. That's the unsustainable move. Just like right here, this piece is unsustainable and it gets sold off. This piece is unsustainable. These tight trends, they're sustainable, and that's what you have here at CPA. You've got a really tight trend. So what you're going to look for to short is if the trend continues, you want to see that blow off move and that move to the upside, and then you want to short into that. Another one you want to take a look at here is ADSK. This thing was it was a $42 stock the other day. Big move on Friday. I mean, a huge move. Same thing, all grind here. You're looking for that big old para. When you look at some of these daily charts, they are massive as far as what their daily charts look like. You know, like I said, you got a couple of these that have moved in substantial percentages during this rally. And, you know, if that rally stalls or the market slows that pace, which at some point it will, it's just natural, you want to have some of these lined up to short. Now, the ones we talk about, do they always work out? No, because you can't forecast the future. But what you have to do is have a list, a go-to list, so if the conditions turn in that favor, you have a plan for that. If they don't, you have a plan for that too. That's what we need to be doing. So ADSK, especially if we get a blow-off move, I think if we start out Monday with a big gap, we got to look at this one here. Also, maybe take a look here at PAC-B, a pretty popular stock. And this is what it's, well, there's so many rooms out there, so much going on Twitter. Rule of thumb lately is if it's cheap and it's ripping, it's crowded. You know, and this is just where it starts. People just think that just because it's a cheap old stock and it's up 20 or 30%, you know, it's a short. And at one time, that was legit. You know, if you go back to 2012, 2011, I'm making up 2012, 2011, you go back to those years, it was more prevalent. It was a strategy that was effective. Now I think you've seen something, especially this year, or you can go back a couple of years really, with Digley, Gene, Lake, VLTC, PBMD. I mean, you can go back here, and it's turning the other way. It's starting. People are aggressively shorting too early, and they're just getting their pants squeezed off, and they're losing their accounts. The problem that you have with these kind of cheapo stocks that you don't have with the bigger boards. The bigger boards can go. Trust me, they can go a few bucks, and they can really put a good squeeze on. But if you maintain a good position size per account, even if you get ringed, I mean your neck just strung out and wrung, you usually live to tell about it, meaning you have an account. The problem with these cheapos, like a VLTC, those are account grenaders. Like you could just make one, you could have a great trading career and a fantastic year, and you can go overboard on a cheap stock and get squeezed for 1,000 to 1,500%. That's the danger, because if too many people jump on the same side and they start to get squeezed, it doesn't matter whether this thing deserves to be here or it doesn't deserve to be here. That's not the point. The point is you may ultimately be right, just like a lot of people were right on Gene. Yes, it went down to the turds. VLTC, yes, it went way down to the turds. Yes, all of those stocks came down. Digley, Lake, Gene, VLTC, PBMD, you know, they all came down. But you know what? There's a lot of people that lost their accounts during that process, and they're not here right now trading because of that mistake. And you don't want to be that kind of person. And maybe you were, and you've refunded. I was once that kind of person who went through a couple accounts. I know. So let's get down to business here. You've got some resistance levels here you might want to look at. If shorting is your look, 870s, possibly a squeeze through 9, just like the rest of the stocks. I think you need to put yourself in the position of parabolic movement. This right here. You want to be up here where you've got control of the trade. That way you can stop out at high a day. You've got to respect your stops on something like this. Maybe something else that doesn't have the volume or the price tag and all the chat rooms, quote unquote, there. Maybe you can afford to be a little bit lenient, but not on these. You got to respect your stops, because it could turn into, you know, it could jump to 12 or 15 if it wants to. But a big movement. We all know it's up about 100% here over the last week. Yes, it'll probably pull in a little bit, but you've got to trade that intraday pattern. You've got to look for these right moments to get yourself in there. If you chase down in the hole, if you chase after a couple of reds, if you wait too late for confirmation, you're always going to be behind the 8 ball on it. So not too bad here. PAC-B, we'll see what happens. Now, what hasn't happened in this market rally we talked about the other day was that, you know, the bios haven't really followed this whatsoever. I mean, they took a big hit, of course, Let's pull a couple of these up here. Let's just look at the IBB. Let's try that. You know, they took a beating in the market fall, and you can see they don't quite have that V-shaped recovery. You know, there's a little bit of a bounce. The bleeding seemed to have stopped for the short term. But for the most part, you know, we haven't seen a good bounce out of not just the IBB if you're trading an index itself or the ETF, but we have seen stuff like, you know, some of the healthcares, like an RDUS or something like that here. I mean, these things haven't bounced at all. And this one right here is in a downtrend. We have also brought up on several watch lists blue. Let me find blue here in this mess. There it is. Blue. This thing's had a pretty rough go. You know, it hasn't been able, it's had a few good days, but hasn't been able to lift out of this shell. And for the most part, a lot of them look just like this. You know, they're down here, and there's been a few brief bounces. And I would say, with the exception of Juno, you know, Juno's ramped up here pretty good, but this is one of the few out of this whole group that hasn't really bounced that much. And what I mean by this is, you know, if we continue this strength, that perhaps these will go into a lifting phase this upcoming week. Maybe we'll see a bullish run, something like what we've seen in the overall markets. Maybe we'll see a nice few-day rally here. If we start to sell off here or this doesn't hold, I mean, this is going to drag everything else down like it did. It's going to be a repeat of what we saw a couple of weeks ago. So it's kind of like a 50-50 thing here on what might happen, and it's definitely a sector, and a few of these stocks need to be watched. Just like I mentioned earlier in this, you want to keep some of these on watch. That way, if things start to get ugly, you've got a short plan. If things get good and we see a couple of day bounce, you have a long plan. So you've planned out for both variables and how you would trade these stocks. That way, when it does happen, one of the scenarios will happen, you're prepared, you're ready, and that'll eliminate a lot of the anxiety. So let's kind of go with that. There's going to be a lot of great opportunity. There's going to be a lot of good things that happen. And one of the things you're looking for, is I've kind of made redundant during this whole thing, it's all about that intraday chart. You know, we talk about in our room, it's not a chat room. I don't even like to call it a chat. That's an insult to what we're doing at the Lincoln List, because it's all done live on screen. You know, it's not about whether your idea is correct. You know, that's just one facet of your game as a trader. Your idea. Yeah, you might say this stock is going to go down. It's going to be trading at $50 on such and such date. You might be right. But in the meantime, you might get smoked on that trade and run out of money. You know, you need that idea. You need to be able to execute the idea that you have set out. And then once you're in that trade, you need to be able to manage that trade. All three of those things have to happen for you, or you're screwed, right? Because you can have a great idea, but you can mess that idea up. You can get in too early on your stock. You can chase it. You can stop out too soon. You can mess that whole trade up, and then that idea just goes to waste. So kind of keep that in mind with your trading. If you need help, you're sitting there and you're trying to do, you know, you're trying to go to another level. This is all about increasing your productivity, making yourself better, working to be better, and working to be the best that you can be. Not trying to figure out how I can be like XYZ trader on the internet. That's not what you're trying to do. You're trying to beat yourself. You know, you're trying to do better for you, to increase your where you're at, try to be better each week, each day, and so on. So if you need some help, feel free. I'm stuttering already. Feel free to visit thelincolnlist.com. Take our 14-day free trial. As always, if you need questions asked, answered, or whatever, just feel free to shoot me an email at anytime. Service@thelincolnlist.com. Have a great week of trading. Hope to see you soon. Talk to you later.